Hi everyone, Evette Rose here, and welcome to Finding Your Spirituality Summit. And guys, I am so excited to introduce Rodolfo Young, who we have here today with me as a guest speaker. Thank you so much for being here today.
It's my pleasure.
So excited. So guys, just for those of you who don't know Rodolfo, he is a former US Army Special Ops, and he's now also practicing the APE approach to living more of like a mindfulness, personal development approach to life. And he's also teaching other people exactly how to do that. And he's also working with CEOs and celebrities and top influencers. And he's had now almost 21 certificates, and he's worked with thousands of people. And he's also a writer for the Ariana Huffington Drive Global. And now he's also done 2 years silent meditation after coming out of the military. We're going to dive into that quite shortly, because just thinking about that makes me feel a little bit intimidated. And you know, that's something that you did. So we're going to be really going a bit more deeper into that later on. But one more thing, or a few more things that you didn't know about Rodolfo is that he also shared the stage with Eckhart Tolle, with Deepak Chopra, with Tony Robbins, with Marianne Williamson. And he's also the founder of the Brilliance Center here in Bali, Ubud. So if those of you who are actually here in Ubud, it's close to the yoga barns, you guys can go find him there live. So Rodolfo, I'm so excited to have you here today. And wow, US military to teaching people how to connect to the heart.
Yes.
How to work with emotions. But before we get to this giant leap of faith that you took, and you actually made quite a success of it as well, I wanted to talk a little bit about your life when you were in the US Army, because the people that I've met that have been there, that have walked that path and probably still are in there, they're very robust, you know, they're very raw, they're very, you know, it's like follow orders and it's this and it's that. And when I met you the first time, many, many years ago, you were the opposite of that. Like, I first want to that's kind of like, there's a cliffhanger right there. So I wanted to hear a little bit about your journey in the US Army. What is it that prompted you to actually go to the US Army? Who was that Rodolfo?
I would say that Rodolfo wasn't too different from the one that I am today. I've always been into personal development and spirituality and things like this, and I guess the self-work, right?
Yeah.
And I joined the military. This was when I was 18 years old, so more than 2 decades ago. And when I joined, I made a few miscalculations, we'll say. I joined for the college money. That was my main intention. Okay. It wasn't because I was gung-ho to go to war or go fight or shoot a gun. Like it's not really my character.
Right.
But it was more for the college money so that I could actually go and get a higher education. Wow. And the miscalculations that I made at that time, this was back in 1998, was I thought, first, this is the US military, right? So I thought, okay, we haven't been in any wars lately. Like there's none that are going to happen. So I'll be safe. Like if I go into the military, there's nothing happening. Yeah. And obviously right after that, we started having a lot of conflicts and engagements, we'll call them, in the Middle East. And just in case something did come up, I joined as a reservist. So in the reserves, you only have to go in pretty much like once a month and 2 weeks in the summer, just to keep your fitness and your training up. Unless you're deployed somewhere. Now again, I thought to myself, okay, the reserves, they're in the reserve. They stay back, right? Right. No. The way it actually works is if you have active duty personnel strategically located in active locations around the world, if you're going into a new territory, a new place, and you don't have an active engagement there and active troops, then the reserves go. So the Middle East was a new place. It wasn't somewhere that we were actively engaged in. And so my battalion and my group all went there. Yeah. So then I made a third miscalculation, thinking, okay, just in case we do go to war, we do get the reserves called up, I'll join and I'll do a job that there's no way they would put me in the front lines. Okay. And it was multimedia illustrator, and so it's essentially we used to call them combat crayons. We were graphic illustrators and media people for the military. What I didn't know, this was the miscalculation, is they take the graphic artists and they cross-train them with PSYOP, psychological operations, so that we can actually be in tune with the audience that we're trying to influence with those graphics and that media.
Oh, wow.
And then we're placed in the front line so that we can gather the intelligence and actually distribute, we'll call it propaganda, these leaflets and flyers and audio and video media and things like this.
Right.
So these 3 miscalculations led me to being in different positions that I never had imagined or really intended. And that's why I ended up being in special operations, because PSYOP falls under that, in some very interesting warfare and situations. And all of it, to be honest, I think magnified the spirituality and the personal development that I had. It's kind of like if you take somebody who's grown up in a small town, never traveled, they don't have the bandwidth of experience to look at something and see from different perspectives, or to even let go of some of their own. And I think in spirituality especially, this is one of the biggest things you have to do, is be able to let go of a previous opinion or perspective to embrace and open to other potentials.
Exactly.
Going and traveling and seeing very different cultures, very different scenarios, situations for people, this very much opened my mind.
I cannot even begin to imagine. It's such a different foreign world to me, and yet you've been there and you came back and you have this beautiful story to tell, and also the shift that you made, because you didn't stay that person all this time. You didn't stay in the military.
No.
I did, yeah. Oh, talk about post-traumatic stress disorder, you know? What I wanted to ask you is, during moments where things got tough in the military for you, because this is something that absolutely fascinates me, is a person's ability and capacity to make it through challenging times. Because sometimes, even though we think we're not coping, we actually are. Because every new day for me is an absolute success. It's telling me you're making it, you're doing something right. And what I was wondering for you, what did you tell yourself, or what went through your mind when things did get tough during that time? Because you're not, let's be honest, that's not the easiest environment.
No.
It's not. And you're working and you're seeing people who's traumatized, who's in a state of distress. They think differently, they feel differently. It's a whole different world. How did you manage that?
Well, I think there's a few things to look at. And the first is that within the military, even just in my training, you're taught to realize the capacity the human body actually has, and even the psyche, because you know that you're going to be in situations that either may be traumatic or just incredibly overwhelming. You may feel helpless, but you drop into your training. And from that training, and this, the military has its specific kind of training, but let's look at just human development training. We do certain things in our lives and we condition ourselves in certain ways. Maybe it's to get through a heartbreak, or it's to have gotten through a job loss or an illness. And you look at that and you go, wow, there was a capacity in me I didn't realize until I had to. And that was probably the biggest lesson that I got out of my military experience, is whenever those tough times came up, I already had the training that had shown me that, and then I had the real world experiences that showed me that. And so then when I actually came back into the real world, things don't faze me. I look at them and I go, yeah, and this will pass as well.
What I'm hearing is that this experience completely changed your perspective in terms of what you can and you cannot do.
It allows me not to get stuck in the moment and fearful of it being forever. I know things always change. I know there's always, we'll call it a balance point at some point.
Right. I love that. And it's true, because there are these balance points, but sometimes we can't see that when we're in such a state of distress. So what I'm also hearing what you're saying is that you've learned to master that irrational side that we sometimes have, that part of us that overreacts in a moment in a state of distress. You've learned how to really beautifully calm that down. It's like this is where I'm hearing your mindfulness practice already coming in before you've actually actively discovered it, before you've actively practiced it.
And this is the APE approach. So the APE approach is a format that I've developed over the last probably 20 years. And it's essentially acceptance, permission, expression. And it's exactly this. It's acceptance isn't to just be okay with something and like it. That's tolerance. That's very different. But acceptance is to recognize the reality for what it is. And so, for instance, let's say if there was a very challenging moment while I was in the military, to look at it and think, oh my God, this is it. This is going to be the end, or it's always going to be like this. I'm going to be stuck here forever. This isn't reality. It's to go, okay, in this moment, this is the situation. And then permission is to allow for change.
Yeah.
And to allow for change is a little different than force change, manipulate change, cause change. It's to allow, which is actually something that's more about looking and saying, okay, there's a possibility that this won't always be the same. There's a possibility that there are different ways. There's people back at home who are living a different life. There's people across this hilltop that are living a different life. So there is a different possibility. Let me allow for that. And so then that calms you down. You have more stability and grounding when you've accepted the reality of the moment. And then from that grounding, you can actually start to be patient about it. When we're in our stories and we get into these spirals, there's no patience. There's anxiety and urgency and like desperation. And you're not actually able to move or allow change to happen adequately. You're normally blocking it. Every time something's coming, it's not within your control. You're like, no, let me do this. And you're holding on to the suffering instead. To be able to release that, and then as we do that and we start to relax and our walls come down and our defensive stories and the way that we're projecting out comes down, then suddenly we're witnessed in the brilliance that we are, and that's the expression part. So we have the acceptance, permission, expression.
That's beautiful.
Thank you.
And what I'm hearing in that is also to just acknowledge that the fact that we cannot control something doesn't mean that you're being inadequate. It doesn't mean that you're being unresourceful. It's not a reflection of your competency. It's actually recognizing some things are just not meant to be controlled. Some things are just meant to be given absolute freedom and to just let it roll out the way that it needs to.
Yeah.
It doesn't need our involvement.
Yeah. And I mean, this goes right to the crux of what I see a lot of times with people where, in business especially, or in spirituality in our personal lives, you hear the idea of, know your why. Why are you doing something? And we'll hear that, but our mind will be like, okay, well, why I think this, but how am I going to do it?
Yeah.
Right? And that's the piece that we have to surrender the control in. The why, we have full control. That's a choice. That's a direction that we orient ourselves in.
Yeah.
But then the how it comes along, this is where you get to just be curious and allow for something to show up, allow for those changes, the steps, the opportunities that will move you in that direction. But most people will be stuck on trying to control the how, which means when, let's say for instance, actually, can I share a little story?
Oh, I would love that.
Okay.
Yes, please.
So there was a time here in Bali when financially I wasn't doing very well. I needed some new clients, but I was feeling very overwhelmed. And the normal protocol when somebody's like that, they're like, no, just get into the grind, get it done, hustle. And it's like, this wasn't working for me. And I woke up one morning and I knew I had a lot of work ahead of me, but I just had the feeling, I was like, I just want to go to the theater. I just want to go to the cinema. And this is where this allowing of the how, like I knew why, what it is that I needed and why I wanted to do certain things, why I wanted to be of service and coaching and things like this. I just didn't know how to get a new client at that time. And this, idea came up of going to the cinema just to relax. So I ended up going, and it was here at Paradiso, so it's kind of a, more comfortable kind of a cinema.
Okay.
And as I was sitting there, I was the only one, it was middle of the day, right? So I was the only one, and the movie starts, and then somebody else came in while the lights were out, so I didn't know who they were. By the end of the movie, we turn over and we start talking to each other because we were the only two that watched the movie. And this woman ends up saying that the reason she's in Bali, she's looking to figure out how to transition from a job to this other thing, and she's looking for a coach, but she wants to do it from her heart. I'm like, well.
I love that.
So, we have to be curious about the how and allow it to happen. Be noticing the opportunities that show up. But if we're stuck in the way that we think it's supposed to happen, if I had done that, I would have sat at home on my laptop trying to hustle some kind of marketing, and I would have missed the opportunity that was going to be presented.
That is so true. And that's also you letting go of needing to control how it needs to be.
Yes.
And it's almost like a different how of how this is now playing out. I love that. And the openness that you have to that. But this openness also came through in you that grew stronger and stronger from the time of the military, that you slowly started to transition from that line of field to where you are now, because this is now the powerful mentor in you talking. But if you had to take yourself and just backtrack and you go back to that moment where maybe in the military where you had a low moment, or wherever it is that you found yourself in your life, what was that moment that turned things around for you, where you just made a decision and you decided, something needs to change. I need a different path. What was that moment like for you?
For me, it's a little tricky for me to look at it from the personal experiences that I've had and what I've actually seen a lot with my clients.
Okay.
Personally, I've always kind of been one who, curiosity is a huge thing for me. So whenever I'm in those kind of moments, I drop right into curiosity.
Yeah.
But what I find when I'm working with my clients is it almost always takes almost a rock bottom. And I hate that because I don't want people to have to wait till rock bottom.
Right.
But what I've found even more specifically is happening is at rock bottom, they finally surrender. They stop trying to resist whatever is happening. And we come back again to this idea of acceptance. So it's about, if you're in a really challenging moment, stop for a moment the resistance that's going on.
Yeah.
And as soon as you do that, you get a bigger perspective of what's actually going on. That we come back to the acceptance piece of the APE method.
Right.
And when you have that, now you have more to work with. And I think that's for anybody in any kind of situation that's challenging, overwhelming that they're in, just pause for a moment, stop trying to get out of it, stop the avoidance pattern, and just look at it realistically and see what's really there. Now you have some footing under your feet and you can do something.
Right. And how did you start this path? How did you start this journey where it was perhaps once a thought and now you fully embody it, you live and you breathe it? How did that transition start for you?
I came into personal development and spirituality sort of through body work.
Okay.
But it actually goes back a little bit to a little more funny of a story. So this was back in college, and I had already done my military training. I was in the reserves, so I was able to continue my education. And I was in university. I had become known in one of the residence halls as the massage guy. Because, from my military training, I had a lot of endurance, and I would go and I'd just do shoulder rubs for people.
Yeah.
And I used to work for the housing department. So I'd be sitting down in the front, checking IDs as people are coming in, and somebody would just sit in front of me and I'd just sit there working on their shoulders, right? And one day as I was doing this, and I had started to accept tips from people, I had just finished and this girl was giving me like a $20 bill, and one of the university police officers was walking in. And he saw the situation, he saw what had transpired, and he came over, and he was a friend of mine, and he just out of curiosity asked, "Oh, where did you get your license?" And I kind of looked at him like, "License? What are you talking about? Like my driver's license? What license?" He goes, "Your massage license." And I started cracking up. I thought it was hilarious, like a massage license. Why would you need a massage license? And then I was informed why. If in the state of California, and I think in most of the US and many other countries, if you are getting money for physical touch and you don't have a license by some organized institution, then it's prostitution. So when you ask me how did I get into all of this, well, it started from prostitution.
Indirectly prostitution.
Indirectly, yes. That's where the whole path began. When I found that out, obviously I thought, okay, well,
this is funny.
I don't know if I want to continue down this route, so let me go and get the legal, licensing, and that meant training. And so then, I ended up doing my first massage training, and from that ended up doing 1,000+ classroom hours of massage and anatomy and energy work and shamanic and all sorts of things. And as you mentioned earlier, I have over 21 certifications in these things.
That's incredible,
And that moved me into coaching and then finally public speaking and mentoring.
Wow. So, what a journey. What a funny journey. I love the humor.
Never saw that coming.
No, I didn't either. But I think it's beautiful that we can look at not just the hardships, but also from the positive perspective in terms of, how life moves and how it changes and how you just get guided by the universe's humor, but you have to be open to receiving that as well and to actually recognize it and not always feel like the universe is working against you, but it's kind of like working for you, and we have to just take advantage of these opportunities. So when you started the spiritual journey for you, how would you define spirituality? Because it's very unique for everyone, and this is not going to be like the ultimate definition, but it's more, I find it to be very an intimate experience for you and for what it would, for example, be for me. And I would love to hear what's your definition of that.
Yeah, so spirituality to me, I like to break words apart, right?
Please
so we have
do,
spiritual, and then we have almost like ritual, right? Like
Right.
spiritual, right? And a ritual is something that you do consistently. You do it every day. Normally, you try to choose a location that you do it consistently and at the same time every day. So there's a certain habit and consistency to it. That's a ritual.
Right.
Spirit, if we think of it just in the sense of almost like a very practical way, it's an animating force, right? And the animating force is always intentional.
Right.
And so then we look and we go, okay, what is my intentional consistency in life?
Yeah.
And that's how I would define spirituality, is the intentional consistency that I go about life in. We always are looking for what our purpose is. I like to say, just do things on purpose. Be intentional.
Yeah.
And so that's how I would define spirituality, is to simply have a clear intention of what you're doing, a direction in which you're moving, and then be consistent.
What you said is so incredibly powerful, because you know what it also does is it calls people into their power to do something conscious, with absolute conscious awareness and with intention.
Yeah.
Because I think, in what I'm finding and what I'm seeing with my clients as well, and when I work with my students, I see people having a resistance to making decisions. They have a resistance to, making a final conclusion about something, because the moment they have to consciously take that intention, the moment they do that, it means I have to take responsibility. Now I have to take responsibility. There's no one to blame. There's no one to point the finger to. And that, for me, in an indirect way, brings up again, it's a fear of losing control.
Yeah.
So it's almost like people give up control before
all the time.
Taking control, because of the fear of losing it in the first place. So it's like this self-fulfilling prophecy that I see people cycle and move through with.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to people who are sitting there and they're thinking, I have this brilliant idea of how I want to live my life, how I want to find my spirituality and the path that I want to take, but they're just completely beriddled with fear?
Yeah. Well, I love the point that you made that, people are afraid of responsibility, and because of that, they give away their power and they give away their dreams. Again, we have to kind of reframe the words. I think people look at responsibility, and the first thing, like even if I say you're responsible, people are like, oh, there's this sense of duty and expectations, and now you might fail and all this kind of stuff. But we look at the word, we break it up, and it's responsible, the ability to respond.
Right.
This is so powerful. We should be embracing responsibility. We should be embracing our ability to respond to situations in life rather than being afraid of them. And so again, I really like to make distinctions of how we look at our languaging and our terminology of things, because, and the associations especially that we have. If you hear responsibility and you're afraid because you're more thinking, the expectations I may not fulfill, take that away and go, the potential and possibility that I have to be able to respond. Yeah. And then that way, if you have a big project or big dream, you go into it with this excitement because you're going, yes, I have responsibility in this. I have the ability to respond to whatever comes up. Yeah.
And that puts you back in the driver's seat, but in a very powerful way.
Exactly.
I love that. It really helps to nurture a person's capacity to just step into something that they really want to do, but feel empowered at the same time, because this is something I can deeply relate to, especially in the past, where I noticed that I want to do something, but I feel the responsibility and everything that's going to come from it. And you know what I did to overcompensate? I ended up becoming almost like the person with a knee-jerk reaction. Yeah. Opportunity will come and I'll just say yes. I wouldn't think about it. I wouldn't. It's actually not a good thing. Sometimes it worked in my favor, and there's other times where it just sent me like Alice in Wonderland, in this absolute tunnel, and I'm like, how did I get here? Yeah. Because I have a fear of feeling into what could the potential consequences be. What would I have to be responsible for? What would I have to respond to? Yeah. And I noticed that by overthinking it, I would just act too fast. Yeah. So I didn't have that balance, which I'm learning quite fast now in a much better way now. Yes. I'm learning. But it was a journey for me to find that balance. Yeah. And was this also for you a journey in terms of, to get that balance right?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, similarly, I've gone down rabbit holes and other things, and overcommitted or said yes to too many things, or said no to too many things. And it's finding that discernment of things. Yeah. And I kind of come back to that philosophy of take a pause. Yeah. Take a moment so you can actually look at something free of the expectations, free of the pressures and the stress. And when it comes to, for instance, if you're given an opportunity or possibility or an invitation or something like this, I always say yes to the possibility,
Right.
not so much to the thing. Just say yes to the possibility. And now, when you do that, it's you can still have that knee-jerk reaction of going, yes, I will look into it, right? But if you say no immediately because there's some unconscious fear that has come up and be like, oh my God, but what if? But if you say yes to the possibility, then you allow yourself to find out more and find out if it's actually something that fits or doesn't fit, if it's aligned or doesn't, free of the pressures that you're putting on it, but just as far as how does it really feel?
I love that. And you just hit now on a word that's also so powerful and a word that people really fear at the same time, and that's to feel.
Oh, yeah.
And it's not what you said that kind of I want to touch on, is more just the word that you just reminded me of, because I'm thinking now also we're just starting to move out of COVID. We're just starting to move out of lockdown, and we've had to feel a lot of stress. We had to feel a lot of separation, a lot of isolation. We've had to face our worst demons, and we've had to see, people that we love also dealing with a lot of trauma and stress that we could absolutely do nothing about. And something that I noticed and saw also during COVID is that a lot of people found their spirituality during this time, because they finally had that time to go with it, to find what is your ritual, what is it that makes you happy, what is it that makes your heart sing. But for others as well, maybe the experience was so traumatic and so stressful that they became the opposite of resilient, and it broke them in a way, and they lost either faith in spirituality, they stopped believing in it, or they became so numb that they couldn't feel their sense of connectedness to their spirituality. And a lot of people are coming forward, and this is what inspired me so much to do this summit, is people asking me, Evette, I feel so stuck, I feel numb, I've lost faith, I've lost trust, I don't know, does God really exist? Why would God allow all of this to happen? And it's almost like going from that space where we were just talking about, responsibility and being in a state of responding, where our ability to respond has been suppressed to such an extent that we can still respond. Absolutely we can, but to a certain extent in our own inner equilibrium and within our own sense of self and reality. We had to bring it closer home to us, because that freedom is not there anymore. But that's now slowly starting to shift again. We're slowly starting to get that back, and I'm so excited about that. So I'm really seeing the potential of people to step back into that space of responding once again into a much wider arena of life, the way that our life is expanding again. It's almost like life was expansive, it contracted, and now it's expanding again. So what I would love to hear from you is, what would you advise to people right now who feels very challenged, who's feeling deeply stuck in loss of their spirituality? Maybe they've lost hope, they've lost faith, or they're just retaliating and going, like, I'm going to be really blunt here. There were moments in my life where I went like, F you, God, you don't exist to me, you're dead to me. Most of us have been in that place and space, and I absolutely have been as well. And that was like a complete, like, you just burned the bridge with me, like, this is over, our relationship is over. Like that sense of finality. But I always left this little bit of glimmer of hope. Just maybe.
Just make it up to me.
Just make, that's it, Just make it up to me, and then we can be friends again, and we can reconnect back to each other again, And it's true, and I'm being really honest and vulnerable here by just expressing that, because that was deep down how I felt. I cried, I looked up into the sky, and I was just swearing like a pirate. It's like, and I'm sure many of you guys maybe, or the viewers and the people in the world, a lot of people went through that moment where it was just this absolute moment of like, this is what my faith was built on, and now it's just shattered. What do we do in that moment? And have you had a moment like that? And maybe what did you do in that moment? If you can use an example or just advice even, I would love to hear from your perspective.
Well, the first thing that comes to my mind is the very stuff we've been talking about around responsibility and This lack of feeling is normally a defensive measure. We put up walls because something's overwhelming us, the situation in life, for instance, everything that's been going on the last couple of years. And we've given away, even before all of this stuff was going on, we've been giving away as a society in whole our power to different authorities. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't have governments or things like this. Like, there's certain capacities for that and reasons. But we've been giving up our power of feeling, our power of our own truth. And we do that from the moment we're a little boy or girl and we're crying and a parent, unconsciously just says, oh, please stop, don't cry. And so we learn, oh, I'm not supposed to emote. I'm not supposed to feel. This isn't where I'll get my truth. I just listen to the authority outside of me. And so the process is really to take baby steps the same way that you would as a baby learning to walk, back towards feeling and trusting your feelings. And that can be as simple as, a lot of times clients will come to me and they've got these major traumas that have happened in their life. And they're like, I want to learn how to feel this so that I can let it go. I'm like, well, that's not a baby step. That's like you're trying to go up Mount Everest right now.
That's a leap.
Yeah, that's a huge leap. Let's start small. And it may be to have them put their hand on their chest and do you feel your heartbeat?
Right.
So really starting small and knowing that what the critical factor here is to feel safe on the journey. That is the key, to feel safe along the journey. Rather than trying to just get through it and heal something or fix something, feel safe along the way, because then you actually ground in and integrate things. You take the time to do so.
Wow, that's powerful, because just what you said right there, to feel safe in the journey. And most of you guys here also know when I teach, it's all about the biology of the body when you look at metaphysical anatomy. And the only way for the body to become resilient or to feel comfortable is to feel safe. Because that is your body's sole purpose. I know a lot of us, we talk about having spiritual experiences, altered sets of consciousness, and everything that I'm hearing people talking about is experiences outside of the body. I'm like, guys, that comes when we pass over, right? You're gonna go gallivant as much as you want over there, but we're here now on planet Earth. We're in our home. This is our body. We are biologically designed to feel. And we're going against the very rhythm and algorithm that we're meant to be living every day to live our life. And we haven't learned how to understand what to do with the body when it feels unsafe. And I love what you said. It's like, well, okay, let's not try to build Rome in one day. Let's start with the design. Let's start with what bricks we're going to use. And let's just slowly feel into that, because it also actually has a biological response. The moment you feel pressured, the moment you feel stressed, the body is going to panic. And that panic then translates into every single nerve cell in your body, and then you either clamp up, or it depends on what your default is when you feel stressed. We have several instinctive responses. So the moment that the body feels safe, it tells the visceral system and everything else, it's okay. That's the frontal cortex now giving the amygdala pep talk and saying, hey, settle. We're okay. Because that amygdala, it has the maturity of the inner 4-year-old. So we all know how reactive little 4-year-olds are. So just feeling safe is tremendously powerful. So it's almost like telling people, what small step can you take? What positive thought can you have or hold or repeat or positive affirmation that will at least start to make you feel just a little bit safer right now? Not tomorrow, not from the past, but just now.
And a key question right there is actually just to check in to see if you are. And it's to literally ask yourself, am I safe right now? Not am I safe in general, but right now. Am I safe right now? And I can guarantee if you have time to ask that question to yourself, you're probably safe.
I love that. And just one last thing I wanted to ask you as well. What did you do during COVID to cope with it, to deal with this? What was your strategies, and also what will your strategies be now continuing to move out of it?
So I was here in Bali this entire time, and so it's had its challenges along with anybody else. But for me, it was interesting. About halfway through 2020, my partner and I, we had been planning to move to Europe. And we finally, about 3 or 4 months into all the lockdowns, we're like, okay, let's just stay where we are.
Leave Bali? No, I can't imagine without Rodolfo. It's like, wow.
And to be able to actually make a decision that said we're going to stay and we're going to commit for a while.
Wow.
I think that was really the strategy, was commitment. And to do that gives a lot of stability. When we're in limbo and we're trying to figure something out, there's no stability, there's so much anxiety, there's so much more fear of unknown and what's happening and this and that, and way more lack of control. But when you can go, okay, I'm going to stay here and I'm going to plant some roots and I'm going to start to build and cultivate something, that gives so much power and stability and consistency. And so that was really the main thing, was to be able to do that.
I love that, to make a decision. Whatever it is that you want to do, not make the full final decision, but just make a decision, at least to make a decision.
Yeah.
You know? Even just that thought alone, it creates a lot of comfort for you already, because now we're at least moving in a direction and you're not sitting there like with all these different signs and different countries and seasons that you can move into. So it's almost like about just giving your mind a sense of direction, because it's always looking for the next mishap. It's looking for the next mistake. It's looking for the next challenge that can potentially happen, because we're actually biologically designed to be very pessimistic, to be very negative. So we're constantly looking for those tiny little reasons, consciously or subconsciously, to give us a reason to stress or to panic.
Yeah.
And we have to almost like untrain a biological response that we actually also have. Yeah, that's really interesting. I love that. Yeah. Is there any message or thing that you would like to share with anyone right now who might just be in a bit of a point in their life where they feel they just don't know what to do with themselves? They don't know whether it's, should I take a new career? Should I quit my job? Is my spirituality even working for me? Who am I? I know it's quite a big question, but sometimes the answers in life can actually be incredibly powerful and yet very simple. And you're like Mr. Simplistic, like there's so much power in simplicity. Yeah. And we forget that.
Yeah. I love this question, and this is, one of the main things that I do with my clients. I do these self-discovery mentorships, and the whole point is to find clarity of what's the next direction. How do I move from a transition that's going on, or if I'm in a place of despair or confusion, how do I find that clarity? And the first step that I always share with people, one, it's to come back into the body. And so our minds will have so many different pathways that are going on, and so many things that we're projecting out as possibilities, fears that we're projecting also, and we're just going in a tug of war. Yeah. So we have to come down to the body to understand what's the canvas that all that's being painted on. And once we can do that, then we start to find that safety. And in that safety, then we start to relax. As we start to relax, as you were saying, we come out of the amygdala and this survival instinct. We come forward into the frontal cortex, and normally if this is activated and this is a little activated, then the imagination is towards all the negative things, right? It's like, oh my God, the most terrible thing might happen. We relax this a little bit and we start to actually feel okay. And when I say come into the body, it means get up, take a walk, jog, do some exercise, dance in the middle of your living room. Whatever it is that causes you, even just raise your hands up. Anybody who's watching right now, if you put your hands up, you cannot stay in a bad mood. It's just impossible. See? Very hard. If you're really angry and you're in a big fight with somebody, just put your hands up. Both of you will start cracking up. Right? So if you do that, you come into the motor cortex, it takes you out of the amygdala. And all of a sudden, you have much more capacity to actually create creative solutions rather than imagine terrors with that frontal cortex. And then you can start to move forward with those baby steps. Right.
I love that. I love that idea of just even lifting your arms up, something so simple.
So simple.
Can you imagine that if people in the street fight and one just starts to raise their hands up and the other one's like, what are you doing? But I can imagine that. I love that. Yeah. So simple and so powerful. Guys, there you have it. Thank you so much for all this wisdom, for your time and your energy, and also thank you for everything that you do as a light worker for humanity, for society. The world's now going through a phase of healing, and we need light workers much more than ever right now. So if there's anyone even looking at what is my spirituality and there's something that you want to do while you figure out what it is, be in service. Be in service of humanity. Be in service of something or someone who is maybe now in a place of pain or distress, or even animal shelters. There's so many things that's always going wrong there. These, they need a bit of love and care there as well, and it will be so healing and therapeutic for us as well. So there's so many great ideas that you can dive into and do. And so a big thank you to you for you and everything that you've done so far for us. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And guys, also thank you for being here with us. And until next time, be the light that you are. Bye, everyone.